Now, you're welcome. Now, churches in Ghana are alarmed and should be on high alert. That's the reaction from the Christian Council of Ghana and the Charismatic and Pentecostal Council following reports that churches are the immediate target of jihadist attacks. A Bloomberg report revealed some of West Africa's biggest economies are increasingly vulnerable to attacks by Islamic militants whose influence is spreading to the inland borders of coastal nations. You will recall last month, armed attackers killed 5 worshippers and a pastor in a church in Burkina Faso. Well, the Bloomberg report says Ghana and Ivory Coast, as well as smaller neighbors such as Benin and Togo, are strengthening security along their boundaries with Burkina Faso, which has seen a surge of attacks by Al-Qaeda and Islamic State-linked insurgents this year. My colleague Elton Broby has been doing some digging on this issue. He joins me in the studio with details. So we do know that the Africa Center for Security and Intelligence Studies has issued a security alert on this matter. What more are they saying? So,
let me just break it down for you. Now, according to the body you just mentioned, they've been monitoring the activities of the Salafi jihadist group in Burkina Faso. And appears to them that they've now shifted their attention from Christian churches. They've now shifted their attention to Christian churches. Now, on 28th of April 2019, the Salafi jihadists conducted their first attack on a church in Burkina Faso. ACSIS analysis suggests the Salafi jihadists are looking to incite religious tensions in Ghana and Togo. And they're also planning to attack churches in countries such as Ghana, Ivory Coast, Togo, and Benin. Now, what we have picked is that this intelligence is available to government. Okay. And indeed, the Bloomberg report, which was made public today, quotes officials from our security apparatus are saying that they've deployed some security personnel to Ghana's border with Burkina Faso especially. Now, the Bloomberg report rates Ghana and Ivory Coast at heavyweights within the West African sub-region. They've also identified Burkina Faso and Togo as possible targets. Now, what has happened in the last few months is that there's been a concentration of security forces at these borders, because what they've picked is that the Salafi guys have been able to, undertake some raids in Burkina Faso, and they've killed some people. And the intelligence is that they are hoping to extend the activities to Ghana and Ivory Coast. And that's the reason why there's been a significant concentration of security forces in our border with Burkina Faso especially. All
right, okay. Thank you so much for those details, Elton John Broby there. Now, President of the Ghana Pentecostal and Charismatic Council, Reverend Professor Paul Yao Frimpong-Manso, says 6 members of their church in Burkina Faso were killed by the jihadist group that launched the April attack. He wants the security agencies to provide the public with education on how to identify and deal with such threats.
One church that was attacked and people died, pastor and his family and others.
How many people died?
Yeah, about 6 people. That was recorded. I think it came on BBC. And we also had information from Assemblies of God offices. And I even spoke to the General Superintendent that time I was in the US. So I spoke to him to express my condolences. And so as for the Burkina one, there is a fact I know which affected my own church. But then with Ghana, like what you were saying, somebody just posted that information to me. And I've read it. So I'm really...
What's your general reaction? Based on what you read?
What I knew and what I saw in Burkina, I felt this thing should be not treated lightly. And like we said, it has been sent to the security services. So I'm praying that all of them will be on board to find means of, curbing it. And we as churches, we should also be alert and be open-minded and also be circumspect in all that we do.
Talking of being alert, what is the Charismatic Council going to do to ensure that at least your members are safe, given what has happened in Burkina Faso?
Well, first, the Bible says, unless the Lord build the city, the labor in that builds it, and unless the Lord watch over the city, the watchman will create that but in vain. So first, we will ask protection from the Lord. 2, we need, I think this is the time we need to approach the security personnel for them to give a simple education. People who come to us, they ask behavior, they are eager to see the kind of person they are. And we must not engage in, we should still encourage religious tolerance and dialogue.
On his part, General Secretary of the Christian Council of Ghana, Reverend Dr. Cyril Fayose, said the council is on high alert following reports of attacks on other churches elsewhere, but he wants the security agencies to do more.
I'm very, very alarmed. That's why the council, in collaboration with security experts, in fact, this is the job of the national security, to alert churches and mosques, religious leaders, so that we'll be on the alert.
Have you been contacted?
No, I have not been contacted. But we have taken it upon ourselves, knowing what had happened in Cameroon, in Burkina Faso, in Sri Lanka, and all over the place. The world has become a global village. If it's happened in Sri Lanka, it can happen in Ghana. It has happened on the East Coast in Kenya and other places, Somalia and so on. So we must be alert. We must be aware of what is happening around the world.
Yes, you've taken some steps as a Christian body. What steps should the security agencies should be initiating at this moment?
I know that the security services are on the alert. In fact, I was invited to a security briefing as General Secretary of the Christian Council of Ghana. A security briefing about a couple of months ago, and some of these things were pointed out. But at this point, it's at the level of the security couples. And I know the security services in Ghana have sent people to different parts of the country to alert them. And I know they have also fought a number of imminent attacks. But having said that, we have to bring the information or the threat level down to the general public, not to scare anyone, but to make people aware, to be aware of their surroundings, aware of people they are fellowshipping with, and so on. And that is what we need. And at this point, nothing from the National Security Services.
Now, the National Communications Authority has closed down pro-NDC stations Radio Gold and Radio XYZ. Officials of the authority, in the company of armed policemen, Thursday stormed the premises of the two radio stations, claiming they had not renewed their licenses. The NCA has, in the last few minutes, been addressing a news conference, offering explanations for their actions. You will hear from the Director General of the NCA, Joe Anoche, shortly, and speak to my colleague, Kwesi Parker-Wilson, who visited the premises of Radio Gold. But officials of Radio XYZ say they were not given prior notice of the NCA's action, although they had written to the authority applying for the licenses. Erica Hianyo is Managing News Editor at Radio XYZ.
This afternoon, we were taking an event live from the NDC headquarters, and officials of the DNI, National Communications Authority, and some armed policemen, about 8 or 9 of them, including a lady, well armed, stormed the premises. Some of them stood or took positions behind our wall before that, the access to the main building. A few of them took positions within the forecourt of the reception. Others were positioned in the yard, and one of them followed the NCA officials, including some engineers. There was a lawyer among them who led the team. They asked for permission to see our director. I made myself available, and our chief operating officer, Benanti. And so when we met them, we asked why they had stormed our premises with such well-armed to the chief officers. And they said they had brought a letter. It was very simple. They wouldn't say anything. They only wanted to serve us the letter so we could open and read the details. Now, the letter before me currently is headlined Expiration of FM Radio Frequency Authorization. Prior to this, we had made several applications, at least 2 or 3 applications to NCA that we want to renew our licenses based on the experience we had had with the surprise bills that some of us were owing 4 million, 10 million, 40 million, and so on. We have also sent to NCA 2 banket drafts, which were rejected because they told us they would get back to us. And these banket drafts were to cover the renewal of licenses. One was GT Bank, dated July 6, 2017. The latest one was December 2018, same GT Bank, and the amount was 11,156 cedis. This is what we sent to the NCA, that we are ready, we have made application, and we've made several follow-ups. They would tell me Anoche is not there, the board is here to be, and so on. So as a business entity which has been in operation since, what we had was to continue operating with the hope that NCA will formally respond to our request. And then we go through the due processes when they raise the certificate for us to pay the renewal license. And so today we were just here and
So you heard the managing news editor of Radio XYZ, Erica Hianyo, there. Now, my colleague Kwesi Parker Wilson just returned from Radio Gold. He joins me in the studio. Now, you've been speaking to officials and staff of the station. Right. What have they been telling you?
Now, let me be clear that the staff are not happy with what happened today, and also I met some supporters of the NDC at the premises of Radio Gold, and they tell me that they actually heard that the station was going to be shut down. So they came there to stop the NC officials and also the police officials from executing their mandate. But unfortunately, when they got there, they had already done what they were supposed to do, and then they had left. But I managed to speak to the programs manager of Radio Gold. Now, he's very surprised that before today, there hasn't been any correspondence between managers of Radio Gold and NCA. And then the letter that was given to him was dated on the 8th of May, that was yesterday. And today, you come to the premises, you give them the letter.
Which letter was that?
The content of the letter talked about the fact that they were operating without license and that they will shut it down. So for him, he's saying that if you send me a letter on the 8th of May and you deliver the letter on the 9th of May, you don't have any right to shut down the station. We can listen to Richard Ejapon, who is the programs manager of Radio Gold.
Yeah, they were here this afternoon around 2:30 p.m. and their instruction was that they have given us a letter which they were directed to come and shut the station down.
And prior to the incident, were you having any correspondence with NCA?
What I know, we've been trying to get in touch with them to regularize anything outstanding, but they were not forthcoming. That's what I know internally.
I see. Does it come to you as a surprise?
Very, because they came here with fully armed police officers, and I don't think that if you want a station to comply by regulations, you need to come here with intimidating police personnel. I mean, I don't think that's necessary.
I see. And they say that you're operating without authorization. That is the statement they have issued. I don't know if you've received a copy of the statement.
I think I've seen it.
And is that what it is? Is that the case?
I thought this issue was being handled by GIBA, and there was an issue with the electronic tribunal. So that is where we are taking the matter from. And so we didn't believe that is how it should end.
And the letter, please, I want to be clear. What date was on the letter?
It was written on the 8th of May, and they served us today, 2:30.
And you say prior to that there hasn't been any correspondence between you and NC?
No.
All right, so that's manager of the
programs
station.
Manager for Radio Gold.
Did he tell you how much they owe? Because we are told by the NCC that they're defaulting. They've defaulted, which is one of the reasons why they decided to shut them down.
No, he was making reference to the fact that the content of the letter talked about them operating without lines, and so he was only focusing on the lines. Then he said that, that issue came up somewhere last year, and then they are in court, so they're even surprised why a matter that is being determined by a court, the NCA would now move in to shut down their radio station.
All right. Now, we do know that this issue has prompted, a lot of the NDC bigwigs and personalities to visit the station. You've been speaking to some of them. What have they been saying?
So the MP for Ablekuma South constituency, that is Alfred Okovandopoy, was there this afternoon, and also Sylvester Mensah, former NHI boss. And of course, he used to be a presidential aspirant of the NDC. He contested the former President John Dramani Mahama, but unsuccessful. Now, for him, he believes that there is no coincidence. The NDC were holding a press conference, then NCA walks into Radio Gold. At the time, Radio Gold was kind of
so he thinks it was deliberate.
He thinks it was deliberate, and that, in fact, he's accusing government of actually instigating NCA to actually carry out those work. We can listen to him.
Clearly, that it cannot be a coincidence that our party elders, the National Executive Committee and the elders of the party, were having a press conference. And right at the time that the press conference was to be aired, all our radio stations were shut down. This is an interesting coincidence.
No, and I'm sure they're doing their work. It's a very
interesting coincidence. I think that Ghana has come very far. We have enjoyed some peace in this country. It is quite obvious that government is calling for civil disobedience. It is quite obvious that government is calling for some level of disorder in this country. I don't think that any government can thrive under such circumstances. This country needs peace to make progress. And if this is just the beginning of what to expect as we move into 2020, then I think that the NDC would have to brace itself up for it. We saw what happened at Ayawaso West Wuogon by-election. And if that had gone unattended to, one could imagine what the preparations towards 2020 would be. This is yet another manifestation of what is in store for politics in this country. It's unfortunate.
No, I'm quite curious.
This is not the Ghana. This is not the Ghana that we want to live in. This is not the Ghana we would want to be associated with. This is not the politics that anyone should be proud of.
No, but I'm curious because NCA has carried out
this
its
is simply
mandate.
not on.
Radio Gold XYZ
you are a journalist. You are a journalist.
You are a journalist.
And
you say that you don't want them to shut them down because of politically motivated action.
The coincidence is very interesting. I'm sure you are enjoying that interest.
I mean, you don't have the full facts. Maybe perhaps they have started their work before today.
Let me say that Ghanaians are wide awake. Let me say that every single Ghanaian would put interpretation to what is happening.
And for
and the interesting coincidence is what makes the whole thing a little absurd.
Well, the NCA has been justifying its decision to shut down the radio stations. Director General Joe Anoche has been addressing a news conference on this matter. I will bring you details on that presser shortly. Earlier, though, it issued a statement on its actions, and it reads, NCA shutting down unauthorized radio stations in compliance with ruling of Electronic Communications Tribunal. Radio stations operating without valid authorizations as determined by the 2017 FM broadcasting audit are being shut down with immediate effect as enforcement action in view of the decision of the Electronic Communications Tribunal. Following the FM spectrum audit in 2017, some stations were found to be in default and were fined by the authority. However, some of the stations in default were not satisfied and proceeded to the various courts, Electronic Communications Tribunal and the High Court, to appeal against the NCA's decision. This resulted in a decision by the ECT in 2018 which reviewed the status of expired FM radio broadcasting authorizations and which ruled, among others, that companies whose authorizations had expired reverted to the same position as a fresh applicant. While some stations shut down following this decision, others did not. To this end, and in line with Regulation 65(1) of the Electronic Communications Regulations 2011 LI 1991, which states that, quote, a person shall not use a radio frequency without authorization from the authority, quote, end quote. The National Communications Authority is enforcing the shutdown of FM radio stations who are operating without authorization. It should be noted that, as ruled by the ECT, submission of renewal application after expiry of authorization is not a valid application and therefore shall not be considered by the authority. While companies affected by this shutdown may submit fresh applications to the authority if they so wish, these applications shall go through the required procedure for new FM broadcasting authorization, and the outcome will be communicated to the applicants. The general public is also informed that entities are only authorized to use frequencies for a specific duration or period. Frequencies are national assets and not the properties of users, as they are not assigned to them. The authority takes this opportunity to encourage all license and authorization holders to ensure compliance with the various terms of their licenses and authorizations, as well as the relevant regulations. So my colleague Komladum just returned from that NCA news conference. He joins me in the studio with more. So what more explanations has the NCA boss been offering?
Well, Araba, he mentions that they had written to these stations since the tribunal made that decision in 2018.
Right.
And then some of the stations went ahead to default in paying these fines. And so as far as the NCA is concerned, these stations do not have authorization. And so they didn't have to write to them today to tell them that they are coming to shut down their facilities. So it says they're just enforcing the decision by the tribunal, the Electronic Communications Tribunal decision in 2018. And he's been speaking. Let's listen to him.
The decision to shut down the stations in Accra today. So, as I said earlier on, this is an ongoing process, and there are only 2 stations in Accra, right, in the category. There are only 2 stations, that's Radio Gold and XYZ. Tomorrow, I think we are in the other regions, so it could have been any station at all if you just happen to be in the category. A number of stations that need to be affected, and I think it's best that we don't discuss that. But trust me, we are just going to ensure that the right thing is done. But I don't think it would be right for me to stand here and mention the names of the stations. They've all been written to. Every one of them have received a letter from us one way or the other. Some of them in 2017, some of them wrote back to us. So what's the expiration date for Radio Gold and XYZ? Radio Gold expiration, it was in 2000. And I believe XYZ was in 2016.
So that's NCA boss Joe Anoche there. Very quickly, Komla, did he give any assurance of whether the radio stations, these two radio stations, could negotiate their way out of this current conundrum they see themselves?
Well, but he mentions that for now, as it stands, these stations will have to necessarily reapply as fresh entities, and then the authority will look at the spectrum frequencies that they will award them. And he is unable to tell if they will get the same frequencies as they operate on now before the shutdown. He says, just like when your driver's license is expired and you're going to renew it, or you're going to acquire a new driver's license, you do not tell the authority you want this specific number. And he says, as it stands, these stations will have to necessarily reapply.
Until then, they remain shut.
Yes, he also mentioned about that some of the stations that were fined in 2017, their fines had been returned to them because they had not satisfied the full, let's say, the full fines. And so some of them had been paying in bits. But because of this clampdown, they have had to issue checks back to these radio stations. So they exercise that they are embarking on now will affect those stations who had begun even paying the fines to clear off these debts that they had owed the authority due to the fines and the breaches that they had.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much. And that's my colleague Komla Adom just returning from that press conference held by the NCA. You're still watching Joy News Prime. We're taking a short break, but still to come, Opposition NDC Council of Elders challenged the police CID to arrest its chairman, Samuel Opusampofu, following the party's decision not to honor the CID's latest invitation to him.
In our view, is yet another case of intimidation and harassment being employed by the Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo government.
And in business, sacked workers of First Atlantic Bank have for the second time rejected Still to come, we have business. Sacked workers of First Atlantic Bank have for the second time rejected a severance package from the bank. We have details of that offer from the bank. Sandra joins us with those details. Don't go away.
The diaspora stretch. And so what we are saying is that we are calling on management and we are calling on government to come in and mediate, and so that at the end of the day we can still have our hostels at very affordable prices and all. And so that's what the whole Save Diaspora campaign is about.
Okay, so the president keeps saying if so it hasn't happened yet. Why the agitation?
Well, I believe that to every action, okay, there requires an equal and opposite reaction. Of course, we as an SRC, we've realized that if we sit idle, then of course things will get out of hand. Of course, when you look at Pent, Ivandi, TF, you would realize that these are private hostels, and it's evident that a private person is obviously of the take of making enough profit. So we can't sit idle for the aspirant halls to be privatized, which of course we make preemptions to the very fact that prices could reach a peak of 2,500 cedis to even 3,000 at max.
What informed that projection?
Looking as I said, if a private person is coming to take over, he wants to maximize profit. A queue could be picked from the halls I earlier mentioned. They are paying such amount. So of course, if we are making analysis to that effect, then it is in the right direction that we make such preemptions. These are not confirmed prices, but these are preemptions to that very fact.
So President Mills made the commitment to meet you guys halfway. He's left, he's gone. We have new administration in place. What would happen if the call you are making is not heeded?
I think that we are not just looking at it from the point where there was some form of verbal engagement where government pledged to help, but we are looking at it from the point that we are calling on government as the mother body to also come in and help the situation.
But don't you think privatization would also help in a certain way, even though there could be the possibility of paying more, but in terms of managing these, facilities, don't you think so?
Well, I think that we have a general perception that the private man will always better manage our projects, will better manage companies and all. But I think that it's high time we move away from such perception, and I believe that with the right attitudes, irrespective of where the ownership lies, we would be able to manage our facilities well enough. The issue comes down to the fact that if we privatize the Aspera halls, if we privatize, say, Kwapon Liman.
So that was my colleague Latif Idris speaking to the leadership, the student leadership of the University of Ghana. Moving on, Council of the Elders of the National Democratic Congress have described as baseless and needless a police CID invitation extended to party chairman Samuel Ofosu-Ampofo to appear before it to assist in investigations regarding numerous fire and kidnapping incidents in the country. According to the party, the act by the CID is irresponsible and targeted at silencing dissenting views and cowing the opposition NDC. Vice Chairman of the Council, Alhaji Mahama Idrisu, told the press conference the intimidation is enough and says the party will resist any such actions. The party says it will not allow Mr. Ampofo to honor the CID's invitation and is challenging the police to arrest him.
Latest invitation, in our view, is yet another case of intimidation and harassment being employed by the Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo government, using the instrumentality of the police to instill fear in our chairman and supporters of our party and to suppress dissenting voices in the country. A few months ago, the police, based on a supposed leaked tape, invited the same national chairman of our party for questioning. Subsequent to that invitation, charges were brought against him and our deputy communication officer, Mr. Kweku Boahen, for which they are currently appearing before court. Owing to the pendency of the matter before the court, we will refrain from commenting directly on the merits of the case. Suffice it to say that we consider the decision of the Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo's government to prosecute our officials as meticulous and intended to frustrate the work of the NDC and its mobilization towards the 2020 elections. This has been done to divert attention from the growing lawlessness and violent crimes in our country, which stems directly from the inability of the Nana Addo government to fashion out a robust security policy that guarantees the safety of all Ghanaians. We are appalled that COP Mrs. Tua Addo Dankwa, a professional police officer who has risen so high as to be promoted to the rank of Commissioner of Police and appointed Director General of the CID, has allowed herself to be pushed into such an openly partisan position and the peddling of such a wicked lie against our national chairman. The position of the NDC, which we, the elderly members of the party's Council of Elders, have been reluctantly forced to endorse because of the times we are in, is very simple. Enough is enough. We have had enough of the vile intimidation and fortuitous threats. The NDC will not be muffled or unnerved by Police CID Director General, who has shown by all her actions to be a partisan and unbiased supporter, nay, member of the NPP. Our national chairman is under any compulsion or obligation to assist the police in their investigations, and the NDC will not allow him to honor that. The NDC will not allow him to honor such vexatious invitation. If the CID wishes to arrest our national chairman, they can proceed to do so. We call on all our members to show solidarity with our national chairman.
The party says its former ministers and appointees will no longer cooperate with inquisitorial and investigative bodies set by government to harass and intimidate its members.
Our former ministers and appointees will no longer answer questions before the numerous inquisition panels and bodies established to harass and persecute them. Neither will they respond to the numerous intrusive and oppressive questionnaires administered to them. The living conditions of the ordinary Ghanaian are getting worse. What is needed is a conscious effort to determine the choices we have to make for our survival and sustainable development. This is what Ghanaians expect of our political leaders and representatives. Not political retribution and witch hunting, harassment and humiliation.
Well, Mr. Ofosu-Ampofo lawyers released this statement on Thursday, and it reads, "We act as lawyers for Mr. Samuel Ofosu-Ampofo, the national chairman of the National Democratic Congress, and have his instructions to respond to your letter dated May 7, 2019 and referenced CID/AR 125/2019/34. It's common knowledge that our client and one other person are currently the subject of criminal proceedings in court and criminal case, and it's stated there, entitled The Republic versus Samuel Ofosu-Ampofo and Anthony Kweku Boahen. The charges against them arose out of investigations your office claims to have undertaken into certain voice recordings after the violence-ridden Ayawaso West Wuogon by-elections. You would recall that when your office claimed to have intercepted a tape, our client, upon honoring your invitation, was arrested and interrogated for several hours by your investigators on suspicion of having committed the offense of kidnapping, among others. Realizing that the statements contained in the unconstitutionally obtained tape could not sustain the charge of kidnapping against our client, your office immediately dropped that charge. Having carefully reviewed your letter against the background of the ongoing prosecution of our client, we are unable to resist the conclusion that your invitation and so-called investigations into kidnapping, arson and other crimes is collateral to the ongoing criminal trial, and that its purpose is partly to prejudice our client's defense. Further, our client views the letter of invitation as reflective of an undeniable pattern of political harassment and intimidation which violates his fundamental human rights, particularly his constitutional rights to personal dignity and political association that is devoid of intimidation and harassment. On our part, while we appreciate that every citizen has a constitutional duty to assist law enforcement agencies in the discharge of their mandate, our considered view is that the current invitation constitutes a gross abuse of the investigative and prosecutorial powers of the police as a public institution. We take the respectful view that since our client is not under arrest for the alleged offenses, he is legally entitled to decline your invitation. We have therefore advised him accordingly. Finally, our client has instructed us to make it abundantly clear to you, which we hereby do, that he is a politician, and as the national chairman of the National Democratic Congress, the largest opposition party in the country, he and his party leadership and members cannot help but notice the failing security situation in the country since the present government took office. Your invitation, its tone and insinuations, is simply an attempt to, quote, pass the buck, unquote, and shift the blame over the increasing inability of the security agencies, including your outfit, to manage and control the failures of security and the governance structures of the country as a whole. Looking for scapegoats would not improve the situation. Accept, Madam Director General, the assurances of our highest consideration, and is signed by Dr. Dominic Ayine. He is a member of the legal team for the NDC chairman, Samuel Ofosu Ampofo, and this letter was directed at the Director General of the Police CID, Madam Tiwa Adodankwa. Let's go on the line now because we have a member of the legal team for Mr. Ofosu Ampofo, Abraham Amalaba, joining us on the line. Mr. Amalaba, you're a lawyer advising your client not to comply with the law enforcement directing. Are you not obstructing justice as law-abiding citizens?
This is an invitation. An invitation can be honored or can be declined. When you invite me to your studio, I can honor it or I'll decline. But there's nothing wrong with that.
So as it is, you're not infringing on any laws. You're not breaking any laws.
No, this is an invitation. So we are not resisting arrest. If they had come with handcuffs, then we say no, we won't go. That's a different matter. There is an invitation. So an invitation, we exercise our right whether we want to honor it or not.
I'm curious to know, though. I mean, the invitation was for 2 o'clock Thursday afternoon. I mean, right now it's about 6 hours after 2 o'clock. Have you heard from the police administration at all?
Well, to be honest with you, they have made some contact. They've gotten in touch with our chairman. I must say, I have also spoken to them, but we've not received any official correspondences. They are still finding ways to ensure that we meet them. So yes, there have been some contact.
Is there any circumstances under which you would actually honor this invitation? Perhaps.
Well, the indication is that they may want to meet the legal team, the lawyers. We are obliging, and it's possible that meeting could take place tomorrow.
Very well. Thank you so much for your time. That was Abraham Amaliba. He is a member of the legal team for NDC National Chairman Samuel Ofosu Ampofo. Yes, my name is Araba Kumsin. Thank you for joining us. Have a good night.